Hello everyone, and welcome to our channel, a space where together we pull back the veil of mystery and reveal stories that have never been told. Right now, let your ears drink in the gentle breath of the desert. Feel the searing heat burning through every grain of sand as the southwestern sun of the United States scorches every sense. Imagine you're driving along Interstate 10, the sunset painting the red cliffs a blazing gold. The wind swirling tiny dust clouds into the sky, such untamed beauty makes your heart thrill. But just to turn onto the little road beneath the Salt River Bridge, and you encounter a different world. Tattered tarps in utter disrepair. Your senses assaulted by the smell of machine oil and the strange stench of cold, sour food, the wildlife's natural clock replaced by the rapid breathing of people whose hope is drying up. Behind the glass canopies of luxurious resorts, along pristine white-paved roads, there are lives without maps or addresses, not protected by law. There is no stage there, only the dim glow of streetlights illuminating the silhouettes of ramshackle tents, places where humans are forced merely to exist, with nowhere to call home. Today, I invite you to join me on a journey not meant for faint hearts. Together, we will dig deep and look squarely at a different Arizona, a truth so painful that it's easy for anyone to turn away. Join me, and from here, let us touch the shattered American dream. The escalation and regional outbreaks. When morning breaks over the Arizona desert sky and the pale sunlight gradually gilds the plateau, you might imagine a radiant Phoenix with its towering skyscrapers, spotless boulevards, and upscale riverside cafes. Yet, just a few turns off the smooth asphalt, you'll encounter a completely different world. More than 9,600 people, nearly double the number in 2021, living without shelter, pitching tents along sidewalks and under the Salt River bridges. Tattered tarps billow in the wind. The scent of smoke and machine oil mingles with the odor of cold, sour food, creating an atmosphere so heavy it chokes. This is the epicenter of Phoenix's homelessness crisis, where the contrast between neon lights and the darkness of homelessness is at its starkest. About 180 kilometers to the south, Tucson is also witnessing a rapid expansion of its unhoused community. Along the streets surrounding downtown, rows of tents cluster like isolated islands amid bustling crowds, each footstep stirring the rustle of fabric and the calls of street food vendors. On the city's outskirts, encampments sprawl beside abandoned commercial zones, becoming cramped nightly shelters for hundreds, under a starry sky that no longer protects a civilization that has forgotten its own citizens. Farther north, in Flagstaff and Yuma, despite their smaller urban scales, makeshift camps continue to sprout beneath pine trees or along the banks of dried-up rivers. Flashlights cast flickering light. The scent of damp earth mixes with the drone of insects, composing a symphony of poverty that tears at the heart. Here, everything seems split between the wilderness and modern materiality, yet in reality it all exists under one decrepit sky, where people only survive rather than truly live. The key to this crisis isn't found in the number of tents or the roads themselves, but distilled in cold figures. Rent in Phoenix has climbed to between $1,800 and $2,100 per month for a one-bedroom apartment, costs beyond the reach of 60 to 70% of service sector workers. Even those working full-time under grueling shifts cannot afford to lay the foundation for a real home. This reality is not simply a housing shortage, but the product of a system that has lost its balance between the real estate market and regional wage structures. As the lives of thousands contract beneath fragile tarps, they appear like ghosts amid the glimmer of luxury apartments and gilded resorts. This contrast is not only spatial but etched on every face. Eyes weathered by worry-lined wrinkles, calloused hands bearing the story of long days spent roaming for a place to sleep, and weary voices echoing through the night. A deeper analysis reveals that Arizona's crisis cannot be solved by mere numbers or temporary cleanup campaigns. It is the direct consequence of housing prices skyrocketing far faster than incomes, when those who build and sustain the city are pushed to society's margins. It is a harsh warning. Without groundbreaking policies to rein in real estate costs and boost workers' earnings, homelessness figures will continue to multiply, turning the Arizona desert into a quagmire of poverty under the blazing sun. And now, as the first rays of day sink behind distant peaks, place yourself in their shoes. People with no home, no voice, yet standing defiantly against hardship. This crisis is not just the story of one state, but a wake-up call for an entire society, where justice and conscience are tested every single day. Fragile and dangerous lives. When night falls over the desert, temperatures drop and the wind carries the scorched scent of the day's hot sand through every tear in the tarps. Each camp of unhoused people becomes its own separate world, where humans can no longer live in the truest sense, but only exist in whatever way they can. At the foot of the Salt River Bridge, dozens of tents in every hue, from banana green to drab gray, are pitched on cracked concrete. By day, harsh sunlight filters through mismatched patches, casting glaring beams across their surfaces. At night, when the water beneath the bridge flows silently, people gather around flickering fires. Smoke drifts around their faces like a thin blanket, warding off the cold but also blurring the line between hope and despair. Not far away, under the canopy of trees beside the highway, old RVs are repurposed as temporary homes. The undercarriage stores a few changes of clothes, some dry goods, and jars of instant noodles, whatever possessions remain. Amid the roar of speeding cars, the weary smiles of those trapped in such cramped quarters send a clear message. We are here. We are human, too. And then, in the hidden corners of city parks, areas once reserved for children's laughter and warm family picnics now serve as beds for restless sleep. A tarp spread on damp ground, a worn backpack as a pillow, the pale glow of streetlights filtering through the trees, illuminating haggard faces. The drone of insects acts as the biological clock of a makeshift life, waking them whenever the night grows too deep. In that world, women are the most vulnerable. After each long night waking up shivering in the cold, they bear invisible scars of gender-based violence and fear of assault, their eyes reflecting unease and distrust as they must protect themselves in a space where the law does not intervene in time. Elderly people, with slow, stooped steps, still carry their pill bottles but have had their benefits cut off, forced into isolation in lonely tents. They share stories of medical buses that never came, of prescriptions they cannot afford, and of homes they once knew now only living memories. Children born into these conditions grow up to the whistle of the wind and the musty smell of fabric. They know no classrooms, only pieces of cardboard as makeshift chalkboards. When night falls, instead of warm beds, they cling to each other for shared body heat. Their footprints leave brief impressions in the damp sand, traces of a hurried journey where safety and sanitation exist only in dreams. Socially, these communities are almost invisible to mainstream society. They do not appear in tourism campaigns, are omitted from urban development reports, and seemingly do not even have names in the public service system. Subtle apathy and discrimination, from being denied bank loans to rejected applications for social assistance, to police sweeps of camps without offering relocation, strangle any chance of renewal for these lives. In a space heavy with dust and dim yellow light, we must ask ourselves, how many grand dreams are born under those flimsy tarps? And how many of the bright lights out there grow dim when they see them, those invisible figures cast adrift in the heart of Arizona, the overloaded government and police? At dawn, the city of Phoenix awakens to the wailing sirens of law enforcement, but with an estimated shortfall of over 500 frontline officers in 2024, those sirens sound like hollow drums, unable to coordinate effectively. They step past rows of makeshift tents along the roadside, eyes following every hunched figure in the morning mist. Undermanned and under-equipped, they face enormous pressure to maintain security while showing compassion, yet both missions seem beyond their grasp. The cacophony crescendos as they arrive at Tempe Town Lake, once a tourist magnet with its mirror-smooth surface. Now, that glassy water reflects row upon row of gray-green tents pitched along the shore. Laughter mingles with the acrid scent of smoke and lingering liquor, making the scene unnervingly precarious. Camps have sprung up throughout Papago Park, along the Salt River's banks, and on roads leading into upscale resorts. Behind this tableau lies a brutal reality. Rising meth and fentanyl use is driving vulnerable people into life and death struggles. The hiss of heated drug paraphernalia fills the damp air of the tarps, while flashlight beams flicker over someone collapsing from an overdose. Police, instead of rushing them to the hospital in time, too often record quiet deaths under the night sky. Meanwhile, the support system, transitional centers, is so overwhelmed that hundreds of aid requests are denied daily. Telephones ring incessantly, yet there are not enough beds, not enough staff to process applications, and certainly not enough resources to provide each individual with medical or psychological care. Every time someone hears "fully booked," it falls like a scythe, cutting away the last strands of hope for those waiting in vain. But the clean-up solution, sweep-out campaigns, only intensifies the crisis. In one morning, officers arrive, tear down tents, collect bedding, and load people onto specialized vehicles. It's hailed as a temporary victory for the city, but within hours new tents appear in neighboring neighborhoods, and tears and pleas repeat with dizzying speed. Each clearance merely spreads the problem outward from the city center to the suburbs, from Tempe to Chandler and Mesa, like an invisible whirlwind that carries pain without alleviating it. On the stressed front lines, officers witness tears, confusion, and even anger from the unhoused. They must choose between enforcing order and preserving life. Beneath the red and blue of patrol lights, they often pause in silence at scenes like a trembling grandmother clutching her medicine bag, a man slumped at his tent's edge, or a child peering out from behind a tarp with bewildered, shining eyes. This situation rings an alarm. The crisis cannot be solved by isolated administrative measures. It demands the collaboration of many stakeholders: government, police, healthcare systems, social organizations, and the community itself. Short on personnel? Invest in training and expand the force. Overcapacity? Enlarge transitional centers and streamline intake processes. Street cleanup? Simultaneously build safe temporary shelters so people aren't left stranded. When officers end their shift and depart the camps, they leave behind the smell of cooking fires, clothes hung grimmily on low fences, and the haunting presence of lives facing systemic indifference. They know that as soon as they step outside their patrol zone, those solitary figures will gather again, like an underground river that never runs dry, persistently flowing through the heart of the Arizona desert. Conflict. Workers still can't afford a home. The distant chime of the street clock drifts in as the sun just peeks over the horizon, and the police have departed after a tent sweep. But the greatest paradox waits in the morning greeting. Diligent hands, line cooks plating dishes, medical technicians toiling in hospitals, construction workers on the job, still cannot afford a place to call home. In Arizona, that contradiction strikes like a dagger to the heart of the American dream. Full-time laborers remain on the streets. If you step into a restaurant in downtown Phoenix, listen to the sizzle from the kitchen and the clatter of plates, then ask a server, "How many hours do you work each day?" They'll answer, $16 to $19 an hour, a figure that seems secure but falls far short of rent. After $1,800, $2,100 for a one-bedroom apartment, plus gas for cruising the straight roads, groceries grabbed on the run, and unexpected medical bills, many end the month with less than $50 in their pockets, a sum barely enough for a new pair of flip-flops, let alone to warm the heart. According to data, 58% of Phoenix renters spend over 40% of their income on rent, well above the 30% safe threshold recommended by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development (HUD). That statistic isn't just a dry number. It's a whisper in the dead of night. Meals cut short, essential medications skipped, and doctor visits postponed. Elderly people grow gaunt, their eyes sunken from malnutrition. Children shuffle home from school, adrift among the scent of tarp and coal smoke. No books, no sanitary supplies, only the weak glow of a streetlight casting their shadows. Look at a 10-year chart and you'll see Phoenix housing costs nearly doubling, from around $900 to $1,800 per month, while average wages have risen by only about 20%. That gap is an invisible chasm swallowing every effort of the workforce. Amid the opulent skyline and flimsy tarps, the very people who build and sustain the city have become victims of a real estate market unbalanced against the value of their labor. Policies lacking enforcement or ineffectiveness. Walking under the city's pale yellow lights at night, you'll come across hastily printed notices plastered on walls. No tent pitching in public spaces. That is Law SB 1713, enacted with the aim of cleaning up the streets. Yet behind that edict there is no transitional map for those forced to relocate. When authorities arrive to dismantle camps, they hurriedly collect bedding, leaving behind piles of trash and human suffering. By the next morning, new tents have sprung up on another street corner, as if trapped in an endless, inescapable loop. Similarly, The Housing First program in Maricopa and Pima counties, once lauded in the media, actually meets less than 20% of real demand. Affordable apartments are reserved for the few with complete paperwork, while thousands of others must still lie down by the roadside, listening for the sudden wail of nighttime sirens. What seemed like a humane policy in theory turns into a worthless scrap of paper when confronted with backlogged applications and a severely limited housing stock. The race to secure a spot at social housing counters becomes even more treacherous when criteria are excessively strict. Applicants must have a fixed address, prove stable income, and carry no debt. Yet it is precisely the unhoused who lack an address to record, lack documentation of income, and carry debt incurred during crisis. This vicious cycle means they are eliminated before they even start, needing paperwork to get housing, and needing housing to get paperwork. The long-term consequence of this series of management policies, rather than solutions, is worsening conditions. The homeless not only cannot stabilize their lives, but are also branded as lawbreakers, fined, and sometimes stripped of personal belongings each time they are swept out. Meanwhile, the social housing pool remains small, procedures remain tangled, and the people's desperation only deepens. Without comprehensive policies, from building more temporary shelters and simplifying application procedures to guaranteeing minimum living standards, Arizona will remain trapped in this vortex of crisis, where people are erased from the human rights map and only noticed when they inconvenience your view. Living on the edge of the system, invisible and non-existent. Amid the fast-paced life of Arizona's cities, nearly 40% of homeless people do not appear on any administrative map. They have no identity card, no household registration, no bank account, and no health insurance. Under the pale yellow lights of the emergency room waiting area, they are shadows slipping past the 000 call switchboard, never successfully getting connected. Many of them are veterans who once wore threadbare uniforms and now wander the desert of everyday life. Some are Navajo indigenous people, red-blooded by heritage, but once they set foot on the mainland, they quickly vanish from the system. Others carry minor criminal records, only nonviolent offenses, but that social stain stamps their files, excluded from the outset. Subtle discrimination permeates every encounter. At the aid registration desk, staff eyes flick over the blank name field. In medical centers, the receptionist sighs upon hearing no insurance. And on buses, they quietly shrink into a corner to avoid other passengers' gazes. Every contact with the system, from healthcare to education, is met with a door slammed shut. The suffocating loop is written into the regulations themselves. To obtain an identity card, you need a residential address. To have a residential address, you need a certificate from a social agency. To get that certification, you must have health insurance. And to have health insurance, you need the identity card. It's a refrain of must have A to get B, must have B to get A, with no escape, keeping them locked out of every form of assistance. Under Arizona's vast sky, they resemble invisible grains of sand, blending into the scorching sun, swept up in a sandstorm, until no one sees them when they swirl into the wind. From policy to enforcement, we have inadvertently created a class of non-existence. No documents, no hope, carrying only loneliness amid a glamorous city. And when people are stripped of the right to be seen, they also lose the right to live. The stark two-toned urban landscape, when dawn reveals half its face beyond the Sonoran Mountains, Phoenix awakens under the red and blue LED glow of towering financial buildings. Their glass panes sparkle with the early sunlight, daring anyone to dream of another life. Just steps away, weathered plastic tarps in every hue are stretched over rickety wooden frames. That is home for hundreds without an address. And the stillness of morning, the scent of charcoal smoke, the stale odor of faded tarps, and the hushed murmurs of tent camp residents mingle with the hum of air conditioners from five-star hotels. Stroll down Roosevelt Row, and you'll witness gentrification tearing diversity apart. Once vibrant graffiti walls, symbols of street art, now serve as backdrops for boutique cafes charging $30 a cup. The low-income residents who formed this neighborhood's heart are forced out, replaced by luxury apartments gazing onto the skyline. The rustle of new lease agreements, the snap of familiar storefronts closing, and the sighs of small shop owners pushed to the margins all compose a symphony of loss and irony. Tempe's urban fabric tells the same story. Whenever a music festival or marathon is scheduled, police and cleanup crews descend like an army of wind chimes. They break up camps along Tempe Town Lake, booming over loudspeakers, move immediately for public safety reasons. Across the street, branded shoppers stride by without a glance at the few scattered tarps. After the cleanup, only cold apologies from official announcements remain: no temporary housing plans, no social or medical support. In this two-tone cityscape, one side features luxury apartments with gilded lobbies and glass elevators overlooking infinity pools. The other shows rusted gutters on patched-up trailers, homemade power outlets flickering, and public water faucets so scarce that residents queue for hours. Beneath streetlights and the gleam of high-end boutiques, people live in makeshift trucks covered with plastic tarps, with no electricity or running water, clinging to the prosperous metropolis like a bitter exclamation point on a broken American dream. Caught between these extremes, the city seems sundered in two, one half proud and opulent, the other adrift and forsaken. Every paver, every rustling shrub carries a question. What does progress mean when we build silken towers while forgetting the hearts crying out in our streets? And what becomes of justice when wealth and poverty carve a city into two worlds that cannot touch? Poverty becomes a tourist experience. If you type Phoenix Reality Tour into Google, you'll find so-called social reality tour packages promising the most authentic street life experience. Tourists in white t-shirts, hip bags, and pricey sneakers are guided by advisors who once lived in tents, walking through camps along the Salt River where faded green tarps glow in the sun and the scent of charcoal smoke still lingers in the air. Ironically, the suffering of unhoused people has now become a destination. Underground tours lead visitors into the darkest corners, past old trucks converted into temporary homes, and stop at crudely hand-drawn signs explaining how to apply for aid and where the transitional centers are. They snap grinning selfies for TikTok. Check in at the Phoenix homeless camp. Who's brave enough? Videos titled Real Arizona or 24 Hours Living with the Homeless rake in millions of views and buzzing comments, yet rarely include any proposed solutions or genuine calls to help. On YouTube, the channel Street Views AZ uploads clips like Sleep Like a Homeless with tutorials on how to pitch a tent in 5 minutes and tips to stay warm when the temperature drops a few degrees. B-roll close-ups of torn tarps, mini propane tanks, and smoky charcoal stoves are set to humor-laced voiceovers, leaving viewers both entertained and heartbroken. The trend has become so widespread that city officials have had to remind the public, this is not a tourist attraction, it's a humanitarian crisis. Normalizing and commodifying pain carries a profound danger. When suffering becomes entertainment, empathy fades. Tourists can check in, hit like, then leave with charity-branded souvenirs, while the tarps remain and the trucks still sit under bare trees. Each additional view may earn revenue for a YouTube channel, but it doesn't change a single tent, feed one extra meal, or cover one more health check for people scrambling for a place to sleep. Between two worlds, one a fleeting experience for those with leisure time, the other a miserable struggle for shelter, we see the stark imbalance in the right to dignity versus the right to support. While people online discuss street life experiences as if they were thrill rides, the unhoused are being stripped of their right to safety and to be recognized as citizens. It's time to ask ourselves, isn't it past time to draw a line between entertainment and reality, between exploration and exploitation of suffering? And more importantly, who will answer for restoring even a fragment of the right to full existence to these invisible people? Nonprofit organizations despair within hope. Amid the tattered tarps and flickering streetlights, over 70 nonprofit organizations in Phoenix and Tucson quietly shoulder the mission of preserving hope for lives rendered invisible. Every morning, volunteers from groups like St. Mary's Food Bank, Humum New Day Centers, and La Frontera race against the clock to deliver hot meals, warm blankets, and freshly laundered clothing. They don't just hand out food. They painstakingly help people complete their aid applications, guide them through replacing lost documents, or provide legal assistance when personal belongings have been seized. Yet this portrait of hope carries its own shadows. Funding from government sources and benefactors has become scarce, forcing many organizations to scale back or even close their doors. Volunteer kitchens have had to reduce meal distributions, Mobile wound care units cannot tend to injuries as promptly as before, and counseling services now book clients out by the month. Meanwhile, the number of people in need continues to rise daily, returning veterans, single mothers, Navajo indigenous individuals, and even young unemployed families. The greatest barrier lies in credit, an invisible key that determines one's entire future. Many qualify by income to rent a home, but poor credit scores or lack of financial history eliminate them outright from application pools. They arrive at rental interviews clutching their paperwork, only to leave empty-handed, hearts laden like the overloaded bags they carry. Still, within that somber curtain, there are glimmers of light. At Phoenix's Justice Center, a team of warm-hearted volunteers greets every visitor with smiles, undeterred by rain or scorching sun, keeping their doors open to all comers. In Tucson, the Primavera Foundation runs a health passport program that grants the unhoused access to medical care and legal services, saving lives in critical cases. They do more than distribute meals. They hand recipients a piece of paper stamped with a promise. We see you. We are here for you. Despite limited resources, these organizations sustain the warmth of human compassion for the unhoused community. Every meal served, every pill dispensed, every word of encouragement is like a seed sown in a weary heart, small hope enough to help someone lift their chin and press onward across life's desert. And the collaboration between these volunteer groups, local residents, and government agencies, though gradual, is kindling a spark for the future of those forgotten on Arizona's map. Arizona, a broken symbol of the American West. When you glance at a travel map, Arizona still appears as a dazzling desert of red rock and towering mountains. Yet every day, over 50 more people join the ranks of the unhoused, transforming this place into a symbol of the shattered American dream. Those cold statistics mark lives that once had stable apartments and joyful dinners, now struggling on street corners because of mounting medical bills or an unexpected rent hike. Many of these individuals once held steady jobs, construction workers, chefs, healthcare staff, and dreamed of their hair glowing auburn under the city's golden lights. But in a single night, clinic bills pile up, rent leaps by hundreds of dollars, and the network of medical, mental health, and food assistance snaps. They are cast out of the safety net like a fragile garment torn to shreds, with nowhere to return. Each time a camp is cleared for violating regulations, they must pack up and move elsewhere, abandoning half-filled aid applications and incomplete medical records. Officials unveil new zoning maps and public reports outlining planned residential areas. But the reality on every block is tents pitched on freshly laid brick sidewalks and tarps spread beneath trees that only just appeared on the park blueprint. The rumble of bulldozers hidden behind newly planted flower beds sounds like a bitter reminder. We grow more beautiful each day, but people are being erased. Signs reading "New Stone Surface Area" stand inches from the battered van of a poor family, emphasizing the stark contrast between modern landscaping and makeshift existence. Arizona is no longer just a land of red plateaus and endless skies. It has become evidence of a system that has let workers, veterans, the elderly, and children slip through its safety net. When administrative maps can no longer depict the real lives on the ground, it isn't urban planning, it's the denial of thousands of people's existence. Between the legendary West and the everyday scene of tent encampments, one truth stands out. If a society cannot protect those who build it, then the American dream remains only beautiful on paper, while in reality, it shatters beneath the desert hills. As streetlights illuminate every crack in the sidewalk, we must ask ourselves, can we call a society just when the very workers who lay each brick, serve every cup of coffee, and care for each patient still shiver by the roadside? Parks and public thoroughfares once opened with promises of opportunity and fairness have become security zones, where every step and every gaze is controlled. Those shared spaces, from benches under shady trees to library steps, are no longer for everyone, but divided into seating classes. Paved sidewalks belong to luxury strollers and marathon runners. Lush lawns become ticketed event venues, and makeshift tents are only allowed when the city decides to clear them. Equal access to public spaces has been pushed aside by surveillance and discrimination. Behind every tarp, every camper van, every silent corner of the park, voices whisper of a dream crushed by decades of imbalance in urban planning, finance, law, and community ethics. When the real estate market divorces itself from workers' earning power, when policy focuses on control rather than care, and when compassion is replaced by statistics, homelessness ceases to be the story of a few, it becomes the shared tragedy of an entire state. If you find these insights valuable, please share this video to spread the truth. Hit subscribe so we can continue uncovering untold stories together. And above all, thank you for staying with us to the very end, because your witness and your voice are the spark that can light real hope for Arizona.